Okay, we're live. Welcome to the stream, everyone. Sorry about that. I was just working out some last minute kinks. It was saying that I couldn't go live for some reason, but here we are. We got this Stein Format finals between Jim Bob and Transom. So it should be pretty fun, and we'll see who prevails. I think both players are playing very good decks, and it's kind of interesting. They're not just both like double Stein OTK decks. So, there will be some variety there. But, yeah, it should be a lot of fun. So, yeah, so I'm just sharing the stream link places now that I've gotten that working out. And, yeah. But how are y'all doing this fine evening? I know this was a bit of a... I mean, it wasn't a last-minute stream, but I put it up last minute. So, sorry for people who were looking for it and didn't see it. But here we are, we're back, we're ready to go, ready to rumble, ready to see what goes on in the Stein Format Finals. Now, if you don't know, Stein Format is the format that, let me go to Stein here in my little deck thing. Stein Format is the format that basically is the last draw for Stein. So Stein had been around in GX for quite some time, and here in December of 2006, Stein, sort of became too much of a problem. It won a YCS pretty handsomely. Like it was not even close in some of those final games. And so in December 2006, they instituted an emergency ban for it. And, that got banned. And then that led into Chimera Tech format, which is in January 2007 at SJC Orlando. But yeah, this is Cyber-Stein's funeral, as Hoy says. And I'm not sorry about that at all. I will be happy to see Stein go. I think Stein formats are fun in moderation, but just binging through 4 Stein formats in a row gets kind of tiring. And so I'm glad to, sort of leave it in the rear view mirror. This is the final hurrah, the final showing of Stein on this channel for now, because eventually our locals will reach Stein formats as well. But, for now, we can sort of look back and leave this card behind. So it should be pretty fun. And this will be a great way to sort of end it all. And yeah, it'll be great to see who wins here, because it's definitely a very interesting game between these two. I'm going to make a poll as well. Who will win? Will it be Jim Bob or will it be Transom? So I'm going to put that in here. Jim Bob or Transom. And I believe Transom goes by Juan on the DB, but they go by Transom on... Okay, looks like that's starting. So actually, I'll check their DB name before doing the poll. Yeah, it is Juan. So I'm going to put in Juan there. And yeah, we'll do the poll. See who will win, And yeah, they're saying their good luck, have funs. Diving into the rock, paper, scissors, and Jim Bob win the rock, paper, scissors. And I already see all the votes for Jim Bob coming in there. We got 1 vote for Jim Bob immediately after that rock, paper, scissors. And, that's kind of how it goes sometimes. There are a lot of crazy things you can do going first. If you want to lean more into Cold Wave Monarch, you can do Cold Wave, shut off your opponent from doing anything. There's Comfy legal, so you can activate Comfy. Or you just set up for Monarch plays on the following turn to go into Stein stuff as well. There's a lot of busted stuff. But it looks like Jim Bob's just going to set 2, pass back to Transom. And as a note, Transom has 47 cards in deck. Kind of wild. Very, very much not a typical choice. Most of the time in these formats, you want to play as close to 40 as possible if you're playing more of a combo-oriented deck. But it seems like Juan is playing Warriors. And in Warriors, it's arguably less important to play 40 cards because there aren't any cards you super want to draw. I mean, you could maybe argue Rhoda is one of them. But Warriors is sort of like a toolboxy aggro deck. So the idea is that, you will always have the tools at your disposal to deal with whatever happens. So just playing more good cards in the deck is fine. And it does make your Rhodas more powerful because you have more options to go into. So it looks like Exiled Force coming down here, popping that DD Warrior there. So Jim Bob on some Warriors as well. And we'll have to see exactly which Warriors reign supreme. Assailant coming down now. And will that be okay by Juan? It looks like it will. So... DD Assailant attacking in for 17. Dropping Juan down to 6,300 here. And, okay, it looks like that will go through. Oh, no, Sakuretsu Armor is going to take that down. So, both these players, not really on the full-on Stein OTK decks, but I think it's good. In the last Stein Format tournament held on Format Library, this wasn't the case, as Stein OTK deck did make it to the finals. So, it is important to note that. But it seems like these are both warrior decks, so Saku's going to trade with that Zalug there, and Juan's going to set one pass back. Now, even though these decks are playing warriors, Stein is a card that pretty much every deck plays, because if you've got Last Will, then you can easily go into it. There are a lot of different instances where you can go into it, and this is getting in for a ton of damage and also ripping a card out of hand. And this is very important because this does drop Juan down below the 5,000 life point threshold. So this means that if Juan does draw Stein or ways to get into Stein, then those are a bit worse than they would be otherwise. So very good stuff by Jim Bob here. Also ripping a card out of hand. So this is looking pretty bad for Juan overall. And we'll have to see if they're able to bounce back from this. But it might be a bit too late in this game here. This might be a pretty quick finals also, as a note, because these games tend to go pretty quick. Avarice getting pitched. Avarice is another reason to play, a very, very big deck. You don't necessarily want to draw Avarice, but you want to draw in late game. There's arguments that it doesn't really help you to play more cards to then avoid drawing Avarice, but I feel like most people feel that it's better if you're playing things like Avarice or something to bulk up your deck a little bit more to get rid of that. But Exiled Force coming down there for the Warrior League, so the Assailant can get in yet again. That will indeed go through, dropping Juan down to 3,200, and Jim Bob setting one, passing back. Now, if Juan has a Heavy here, which they have not used up yet, then Heavy can clear away the back row and the pre-mat, dealing with the Assailants as well. So that's pretty nice, sort of 2 for 3, or not even 2 for 3. Yeah, 2 for 3 trade, because the back row also here would get used up by that. But Tomatoes coming down instead and just coming out in attack, passing back. So it seems like this is playing around Mystic Sword in level 2 and also playing around Nox, so it makes sense. But Stein does get unbanned later, then banned again. Yeah, I think one of the more recent lists actually banned it again. But that's due to sort of different things, because you can do things with like Reaper Dawkus, changing Stein into a Psychic, and then you can equip, Telekinetic Power Cell or something like that to it to then prevent you from having to pay for its life point cost. But it looks like that's going to be the end of the game. Juan's like, I cannot get myself out of this situation. I just lose there. So showing that even the non-Stein decks can get pretty aggressive. But I'm happy we didn't see Stein there, even though it is Stein format. Summoning Exterio, also very good. There are a lot more powerful fusion monsters that you can bring out with Stein and abuse Stein with. So yeah, definitely tough stuff for Stein being legal in Modern, but no longer legal in Modern. And eventually we'll be covering that history as well. So look forward to that. I mean, I know not everyone does look forward to the Modern formats, but we will still hopefully be holding events for older formats as well, even if we get into the Modern age. But yeah, that's a long time in the future, so we'll have to play it by ear around there. But yeah, I think these games have been pretty good so far for a format called Stein Format. They've been pretty back and forth, but that's probably because both players are on Warriors. And, you might wonder, like, why did both players end up on Warriors in the finals? And the reason for that is that, like, as I mentioned earlier, Stein is a card you can just slot into pretty much any deck. And, if you do go all in on the Stein MTK strat, it can be a bit bricky. It can be a bit awkward. So, a deck like Warriors is just generally pretty good and can deal with a lot of different threats. So, other decks that, are in sort of meta contention, Chainburn, another deck that 2 people topped with here, got into top 8 with. Now, there were some sort of issues in Swiss with, like, ruling things and plays that shouldn't have been actually able to happen. So take the results there with a grain of salt. I'm not saying that every Chainburn game was like that. There is some Chainburn games that did affect the deck standing there. But either way, Chainburn, it has a pretty good matchup into Stein decks because you're trying to drop them down below 5,000. And also, if you can just side into Stein OTK, it's pretty good, which other decks can side into Stein OTK as well. But, it's just that something that, like, Chainburn is lacking in future formats is, like, a really, really powerful thing to side into to end the game. Because whenever you side out of Chainburn, you're still playing a ton of traps. So things like Decree really hurt the deck a lot. You're still playing some burn cards, so things like Wombat hurt the deck a lot. So, in this format, you can easily just side in a Stein package and hope to win off that. But in other formats, you can't necessarily do that. And so Chainburn's arguably at one of its stronger incarnations right now. But, we'll have to see how it does in future formats. Okay, it looks like Exiled Force coming down here to pop the DD Warrior. This makes sense because you don't want to have to deal with the Sangan there. They could have attacked in with the Exiled Force into the Warrior, but if there's Saku, then, pops the Exiled Force, and this accomplishes the same thing pretty much anyways. So I think this was the correct move. The only punish here is if Jim Bob does have like a pre-mat or something to bring back that warrior and then attack into the sand game. But Juan might have ways to deal with that as well, like Sakus of their own, MSTs of their own, things like that. So this should be pretty fine here. And Jim Bob's got to think about what to do against that Sangam. Now, they do play like Warrior Lady as well, so you can summon that Warrior Lady, hit into the Sangam, but it looks like they're going to go for Sidra instead. Sidra, pretty good card in this format, enables you to get aggressive, so it's pretty good. But yeah, sorry if I sound a bit flustered in this stream. I just came off a stream with Janjo as well, in the Top Deck Guys podcast over on Janjo's channel. So definitely check that out if you are interested in some good podcast episodes each week. But so yeah, this is like, it's like 2.5 hours straight of streaming so far. So, it's not at the beginning of the stream for me. This is like, the late stretch. So, yeah. That being said, I'm happy I was able to still hit the 8:30 mark. Although, again, things were a bit awkward. Like, for some reason, it wouldn't let me go live right at 8:30. Maybe just needed to load up a little bit more. But, yeah, it worked out in the end, ultimately. So, MST hitting a ring, that's pretty good there. You don't necessarily want them to use ring to, get aggressive with their own Cyber Dragon, or potentially if you summon out Stein, pay 5k, and then they chain ring to the Sidra. That's just the end of the game there. So, you don't necessarily want to do that sort of thing there. What's my opinion on DD Warrior? Very good question, Hoy. I think, in my opinion, I think the card is good in Warrior decks because there are a lot of things that it hits that, your opponent does not necessarily want it to hit. And in a more aggressive format like this, I think it is good just to have basically another copy of DD Warrior Lady there. So, am I restocking my bathwater anytime soon? That's a very, very good question. Unfortunately, the last order of my bathwater did sell out very, very quickly. So I need to sort of like, produce some more. But, I'll get that in the store for y'all within probably 2 weeks to a month. So, yeah. Don't worry, Zacharoni and Cheese. You'll be able to order as much as you want in the future. But, yeah, I think in Stein Format it's good. In other formats, it's a bit awkward. Like, I think in Chimera Tech format, it might be a bit bad, although it is sort of a way to protect against Overdragon. It has good applications against decks that do want to be recurring things from Graveyard, like Neos, which is a rogue deck in my opinion, but like, really tier 2. But, ultimately, I think that, there are some neat applications to things. So, it could potentially be good. It really just depends on people testing it. Like, I don't think people really tested Warriors in Chimera Tech format, just like base Warriors. So, I don't know. It really is an open-ended sort of situation for it there. Econ being used on the Dawn. I mean, Juan was going to trade a card for that Dawn either way, just depending on whether you wanted to use the enemy controller or the card in hand. It looks like they did not want to lose the card in hand, so now they're T-setting, passing back. But, it's not looking too good for them. Now, Jim Bob is lower in life, so that's pretty good for Juan there. But Rhoda to grab, like, an Exiled or something like that. But, yeah, I think Neos is tier 2. I don't know. I'm willing to go out on that limb. I think just having a deck that can easily recur a big body from Grave is pretty nice. So, I'm willing to go out on that limb. I'll say it. I'll say Neos is tier 2. But I don't know. It really does depend on how the meta develops. Like, Chimera Tech's really interesting. Because, like, it really is a format where, ooh, okay, I'm excited to see that M. Shobes. M. Shobes is a top-class cook in a lot of these old formats, so I'm excited to see what their spicier recurring vanilla deck is. But yeah, Don Daluk, very, very good monster here. Pot, oh, that is really good here. Drawn 2 cards here in a pretty rough situation overall. Low resource situation. Now you've equalized that back a bit, so very, very cool stuff. But yeah, Don Daluk is so, so cool. And I'm excited to, I don't know. I'm excited to show it off here. Dawn is a card that, very popular in GOAT format, very popular in Yada format, very popular in a lot of formats where it's legal. But it's one of those cards that's like never like too backbreaking. It's just a card that will pop up in different lists. Some people won't play it, some people will. But it's always cool when it does pop up. And both these players are playing it, so very, very cool there. But Sasuke attacking into a Saku there. That'll go through. And now it seems like the shoe is kind of on the other foot here. Juan has the aggressive pressure here. Oh, Graceful Charity is coming down, and that will definitely be good for Juan here. So, again, game 2 is far from over, but it definitely is looking pretty good for Juan here. But, Graceful, I can't believe that Graceful's around. And, no Chaos Monsters, so you don't need to worry about that, as History of YGO 1 is pointing out. No Chaos Monsters, so that's pretty good. And it does make this format a little bit different from other formats around this time, right? I think the Chaos Orcs and things like that, having Chaos as a deck is, a good thing that can be splashed into multiple engines, but also just like it's, a good deck in the meta, right? It fills the control slot pretty well. And with that gone, a lot less control, and so it's a bit tricky. Okay, I mean, not every deck has to be as good as other decks to be fun to play, and as long as it does have its upsides, I think it's still, a fine thing to do. Oh, heavy, no! Oh, but the ring? Okay. Bit of a risky ring there. Because now you're down pretty low, and, Jim Bob might have something here, but it looks like they don't have a monster, so it's just sort of like, getting in for that damage. Rhoda, really, really good here. You probably want to get something to get under bottomless. We have seen one bottomless out of Jim Bob, so I don't know if they play another monster to get under bottomless. It looked like they're just getting the assailant. They could either set the assailant or summon that out, play in a bottomless, and yep, there's the bottomless. Banishing that, but you're in a top deck situation, so it makes sense there. I'm not sure I would have ringed there. I would have been maybe a little bit too scared, but I don't know the content of Juan's deck exactly, so maybe it makes sense given, what they know of their deck and what they've used up. But it's looking pretty bad here. That warrior attacking in for another 12. Now, it's not lethal here. Ring is gone as well, so you don't need to worry about that. But it, being down to 200 puts you in a really, really tight spot. So, yeah, it's just so tricky. Setting one. But, like, I don't know if you're Jim Bob. Oh, MST there. That's so rough. Very, very good games indeed. Very, very good games. Wowza. Yeah, that was wild. Yeah, and very, very intense stuff there from both players there. And I'll try and start the call, see if they're interested. Okay, I'll start. Yeah, let's get their thoughts on this format and the games that they played. So calling them now, and yeah. Was definitely some caveman Yu-Gi-Oh! John L, but that's how it goes sometimes, Even in the GX era, you have some older style games as well. But I'm going to play the replay as well, just in the background, showing both hands. And it should sort of be... I'll fast forward it, just to sort of show. Yeah, they're not picking up yet. Okay, there's Jim Bob. Welcome to the stream, Jim Bob. Congrats on the win. And you're muted right now, just so you know. I'm not sure if I can unmute you, or if it's something on your end. Okay. No, that didn't. Yeah, I think it's something on. It's not picking up a mic or something. That might also be it. But I'll wait for that to get sorted out there. And yeah. Yeah, the famous Jim Bob, as Zachary and Cheese says. I mean, Jim Bob features in a lot of my videos. Very, very good duelist as well. Okay, looks like things are good on your end. Can you say something? Okay, I'm not hearing you for some reason. Yeah, technical difficulties, everyone, but that's how it goes sometimes.
Okay, what about now?
Oh yeah, that's perfect. Awesome.
All right. Sorry, I just got this mic, so I'll just...
No worries. It sounds great. So yeah, welcome to the stream.
Give me 2 seconds here. I just got to post the replay.
No worries. Oh yeah. For those who don't know, this is done through Retrobot. So after the game goes through, got to post some replays there. But yeah, congrats to you for winning this one. This was definitely a very hard fought game. And people were commenting that event went very quick, but like there were a lot of important decisions to be made over the course of this, and a lot of like key decision making. So. And also, this is the end of the tournament run too. So, congrats on making it through the tournament to this point and then winning the whole thing.
Thank you, man. I don't know if you remember, but actually, in one of your, I think on the top 8 on the last tournament, because I got top 8 the last 2 times. The Reaper one was really because I was undefeated in Swiss and I lost in top 8. And I told you last time I was like, this time I'm getting top 4, and managed to make it past that. So I'm pretty happy with that, because my only goal was to make it past top 8.
Yeah, and I think that it's great too to sort of see the progression over time, right? Because a lot of these formats skills carry over, from format to format. And you've been grinding these formats, you've been playing a lot of games, getting a lot of practice in, and it really did pay off there. So definitely a long deserved win. So congrats to you for making it all the way. Yeah, but yeah, tell us about the deck.
Sorry. Do you want me to send you? I can DM you the deck list if you want, if that would There's
Oh
like
yeah, you can
questions
do
that
that
you
as
would rather
well.
ask.
You can send the deck list here, and while you send it, and I can look over it. You can also say like any special text that you played that you felt overperformed or underperformed. I know that the chat
Yeah.
was interested in DD Warrior, which is definitely not a
Oh, dude,
typical
that
pick,
card is
but
so good. I run 3 copies. Yeah.
yeah,
Um,
it definitely came up here.
it is especially in Monarch matchups. It is because they have so many cards, and Monarchs is kind of the deck to beat this format. Um, so many cards that they're just like setting and hoping they stick to the grave, you know.
Yeah,
And so DD Warrior, it basically like because DD Assailant is obviously a good card, but one, it's limited, and two, you're not banishing a Treeborn with that, you know.
yeah, and
Um,
also we saw here Sangan too, like getting rid
yeah,
of that really
yeah.
big.
The main tech card, though, I didn't even realize DD Warrior was a tech card because I just saw that it had come out, and I was like, oh, I have to run that. Um, but the main tech card was I'm running 2 Wild Hearts in the main.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, that's very cool.
So I just DM'd you the deck list. I believe I took one out in game 2. Um, not sure. I think I took one out because it's Monarchs. He was definitely running more traps than your average Monarch deck, but I had to bring in the hate for it, so
Oh yeah,
gotta take some cards out.
yeah, and Transit Bliss was very interesting as well. Unfortunately, we couldn't get them in call here, but 47 cards definitely not typical. Um,
Yeah.
but you know, I think both of y'all played very very interesting lists, and especially for a format called Stein Format, which a lot of people just view, oh, it's just Stein shenanigans all the time.
Stein,
what is there
yeah.
to build there? But I mean, this definitely shows a lot of innovation here.
Yeah, I was really because the last 2 monthlies I've been playing Stein decks. I was playing Stein Monarch and then Chaos Monarch, which runs Stein, obviously.
Yeah,
Um, and I was very happy that the one format I chose, maybe let's move away from the, Saki degeneracy. I was because not to toot my own horn a little bit, but sometimes with Stein, not to say that, you're not it doesn't involve skilled play. It absolutely does, and I will stand by that. I do think these formats are better than people give them credit for. I understand, especially for this community specifically, it can be very tiresome to go from format to format where it's like, oh, this happens again. But there is a lot of nuance to it. But sometimes you do just kind of live by Stein or die by Stein, you know? And with the Warrior deck, it's really a lot of just like, it's a very skill intensive deck. And there's
oh
not as much just like stacking
yeah,
to get your wins.
and also it's interesting too because a lot of decks play like Last Will and Stein, even if they're not focused on Stein. And you could
Hmm.
definitely see that in Warriors too. Like you've got double exiles, so it's like, well, okay, my Last Wills are going to be live more often, so I could go for that. But you're not playing that at all, and I really like that choice because I think it's sort of trusting in the deck more. It's saying I want to be more
Yeah.
consistent. I don't need to sack to win.
Yeah, and the thing with Stein is a lot of when you're running a deck that is not like super Stein oriented, like even Monarchs, there are times when you draw that Stein or however many you're playing, and it's just like this is the last card I needed, you
Oh yeah,
know?
and
Um, and so like sure, if I'm going second, I open heavy exiled last will, I win the game, but that's probably gonna happen, once or twice over the course of a tournament, uh, for a deck that's much less dedicated to that strategy.
yeah, and I think it's also something that it's been remarked on in like forums like Reaper, right, which has had a lot of
Hmm.
tournaments and a lot of very big tournaments, and where Stein is arguably at its most dominant because you got triple last will, the good last will, and so that makes
Yeah.
Stein arc like crazy, right? But in Reaper,
Yeah.
like if you look at tournament wins, Steinark has not really won too many tournaments. I think it won one that I can think of, but besides that, it's sort of not really won it. Other more consistent decks have won out. So
Mhm.
it's interesting because like in a tournament setting, over the course of time, like you're gonna wind up with those inconsistent hands as opposed to the cracked hands, as you mentioned. Even if you'll win some games with the
Yeah.
cracked hands. Um,
Yeah, and I did experience that a lot when I was playing the Stein decks in the last couple, especially the Reaper one. I was in top 8 and I had like just opened the nuts. I don't know if you probably don't remember the list, but it was like very heavy Stein. I think I was running like 3-wheel, 2 Stein, and a limiter on top of like the 6 monarchs, and I was just opening the nuts like every game, and I went undefeated in the Swiss, and then top 8 I just like completely bricked. And that's not
Yeah.
to fault my opponent. Obviously, I think I lost to Clemens. He played very well, but it can be very demoralizing to like play your deck to the best of your capacity and then just be like, this deck sometimes just does this.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to try and move away from that, especially this is the last hurrah for Stein, as you aptly named it. Um, I thought it would be kind of fitting to forgo the Stein for this one, especially because it'll prepare you for the next format.
Oh yeah. And also, speaking of that next format, Chimera Tech, people are experimenting. Like this deck, it's not really. I mean, the difference in ban list between this and Chimera Tech is just Stein. So this deck isn't hit by Stein at all. Do you think that this
Hmm.
sort of deck, or maybe even this exact list, could compete in Chimera Tech format as well?
Yeah, so I have a version of this built in Chimera Tech because what I do generally for any given format that we do is I kind of just I play through a couple of decks until I like it, and then I just play that in the games. Like when we tag somebody, I just play that deck, and
Mm.
I sort of just like tweak the numbers, right? So and most of the viewers probably know at this point what I'm going to be playing Chimera Tech. So I haven't tweaked it as much because I more just kind of built it after I really liked this list. But I do think I really think that Wildheart is a card that people should look at in a warrior based strategy because even in Stein format, I would say it's probably worse in Stein format. The reason why I went with Wildheart is because if you see like the dedicated Stein OTK decks, they are playing a lot of back row. Um, but like a Stein Monarch deck, I think I played against a game against Hoy. He was playing Monarchs, and I sided both of them out because it was just like I don't think this is going to do anything. But in Chimera Tech, a lot of like Chimera Tech OTK is is obviously a very good deck, and it's the OTK deck of the format. But they're still playing like a lot of back row because you just have so much room. Um, and
Yeah.
Wildheart is basically just like the reason why I went with it in this format is because into an open board state, it basically just says 1500 burn. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that is halfway to being out of Stein range, which is super important.
Oh yeah, that mini game. I mean, I sort of call it a mini game in all the Stein formats because like you just have to kind of assume that your opponent's playing Stein, and you've just got to get them down 3,000 life points as quickly as you can because the
Hmm.
sooner you can
Yeah,
cut off that, the less consistent their deck becomes, uh,
yeah,
and the safer you can be. Right, you don't need to necessarily
yeah,
like you know commit a ton of defense all the time and stuff like that.
yeah. Like you saw that game one. I probably in an average game would not have pre-matted the DD assailant there. Um, but I was just like, this gets them under 5,000,
Yeah,
and that means I don't have to worry about a lot of their deck. Um,
yeah, I think
but
it
yeah,
paid off
the
there.
opponent. Yeah, it definitely. I mean, I don't know what their hand was. I haven't watched the replay yet, but either way, it made me feel safe. Which, if one thing that's really important in Yu-Gi-Oh is just you have to feel comfortable with what you're doing. Because if you don't feel comfortable with how you're playing, then you're gonna end up making misplays.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. We actually have a question from chat. Um,
Sure.
that's a bit about the sort of tweaking of ratios. Zachary Cheat asks, why the third widespread over the third Sakuratsu? And I'm also kind of wondering that. That's a very
Um.
interesting tech.
So this format has mostly the same card pool as Chimera Tech, and there was a couple games that I played against Cyber Phoenix,
Mm.
and there was just a couple times when it came up where I had the third Saku as opposed to the third widespread, and I was just like, this is a useless card. This
Yeah.
does nothing. Um, and so I didn't play against any Cyber Phoenixes or machine decks in the tournament, but I wanted to be prepared, and very rarely is widespread a worse card than Saku. It is, I would say, it is a worse card than Saku, like in a vacuum, but generally speaking, they do the same thing. I think I did have one game, not in the tournament, but just like in general, where they had a Reaper and they knew that I had widespread because of a Confi, and so they summoned something bigger out when I only had one back row. So like a situation like that can come up, but I figured a situation like that where they know exactly what my back row is, um, and I can't destroy the thing I want to destroy is less likely than the chance of me just seeing a Cyber Phoenix, and not having it out to it.
Yeah. And also, you got to think about like, if they know your back row anyways, right? Like,
Hmm.
they're just going to play around it no matter what you do, right?
Yeah,
So at that point, you might as well just say, well, okay, in this situation, doesn't matter if I have widespread or Saku, they're going to play
because
around
they
it if
just
that's the way they
yeah.
can. So I
Yeah.
think that makes a
So
lot of sense.
it was more just a metagame call, especially after your win with Dark Worlds playing the Cyber
Mm,
Phoenixes. I thought that it was a pretty high possibility that I would see some. Just not even in the machine deck, but just in general, and I wanted to be prepared for that.
yeah, and that makes sense because Dark World. I mean, I think your deck has a pretty decent matchup against Dark World because, like, if
Yeah.
you can deal with the Dark World monsters, and just get them off the field, like that deck doesn't have much grind potential. Um,
I also am siding 3 die-fi, which
Yeah, that's really bad against, or really
yeah,
bad for Dark World. I played Dark World in
yeah.
this tournament, and I went up round one against someone on a macro monarch deck, and I was like, well,
Hmm.
you can't win them all. Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, another question from Zacharoni and Cheese. They're also curious when the Solemn Judgment gets cited in, because it's
Solemn
definitely
Judgment gets sided in. Um, sorry, you can
no,
finish.
no, no. You go ahead. I was just gonna say it's definitely a card that is somewhat controversial in a lot of these earlier formats.
Yeah, so it's a good card. I don't side it in the Stein decks, or really, let me. The story of the tournament was Stein and Chainburn,
Mhm.
as you folks will see at home when you see the top 8 lists. So though it doesn't really get sided in there, you could make the argument for it against Stein because it can just be like, oh, they true nated, but it's really more like it's a risky card to play in that matchup.
Yeah,
Really what it's here for is just like if there are cards, if there's like a matchup that I'm not super sided for, but there are cards that I want to take out. Um, so for example, say that I'm going first, and I want to take out a couple Sidras, maybe I want to take out a book, and I want to take out a smashing, but the only cards that I have that I'm playing against is that I want to side in is Dust Tornado. Okay, bring in 2 Solemns.
yeah.
It's just sort of like a generically good card, that I didn't want to include in the main because I think it's kind of bad into the metagame. But against more rogue strategies or like tier 2 strategies, it can just win you a game, and it can be better than some other options.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And I think, as you mentioned, the key to this is just the metagaming, right? You got to
Hmm.
know what's in the metagame, know what's not. And I think that definitely applies in this format more than others. But I think this list shows that, that can have its own joy to it, right? Different
Yeah,
formats have different appeals. And in a form like Stein, where you know what you're getting into, the appeal can be just figuring out how you get out of that, right? And I
yeah.
think this list is a prime example of that. So awesome list. I'm excited to see if people continue to use it in the future and how it changes in the future as well. I'm not sure when the next
Hmm.
Stein tournament will be, but
Probably not for a while.
yeah,
I
at
think
least
people are tired of it.
yeah, in this community at least. But as you mentioned, it's sort of like we've been in this for a bit, like just format
Hmm.
after format in a row. But I do think like as you mentioned, these formats do have some charm to them. And
Yeah,
when you go into it as sort of an isolated experience, not just on the back of a bunch of other Stein formats, it can feel really fun. So
yeah.
I hope that people out
I
there.
will.
Yep. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just gonna say because I can tell you're gearing up to go. I just wanted to say one thing.
Yep.
If you don't like the Solemn or anything else in the side deck, I would make the argument for swapping in Mask of Restricts because there was a lot
Mm,
of monarchs. I just
no, that
wanted to
makes
say that if
sense.
someone wants to, but they don't like some of the side deck options, I did feel myself. I think I beat monarchs every single time. I think my only loss was to Alafie, who was playing like a Earth deck.
Mm.
I could feel like sometimes I was like, man, I just wish Mask of Restrict was here. So I just wanted to add that, but.
No, that makes sense. And that reminded me, I forgot to ask, like, is there anything else that you want to add, or is the restricts the big thing here?
Yeah, restricts. I could see. I was gonna say I could see throwing in more T roars, but
Mm.
I feel like maybe after this tournament, Stein will become less relevant. Just
Yeah.
seeing how many other. Um, I liked the one T roar, uh, but I don't know. I think that the list is really, really solid. I wouldn't move up Wildheart. I think Survivor in a metagame with so many monarchs is a must at 3. It's
Mm.
just so good. I could see cutting down some Sidras, and maybe throwing the Mystic Swordsman level 2 to the side. Uh, but I think the list is really strong. I do think it's really good. Like,
Yeah.
there are a couple of things where if you looked at it like I want more T-Roars, I don't like Dust Shoot in the main, I don't really like Book. Totally valid, but I think as a core, it's a really solid list.
Yeah, and this thing looks clean. Like sometimes you look at a list and you're like, well, it seems like that was, half baked or, they had a good idea and that idea carried them, but like there are definitely optimizations to be made. But this one definitely looks
Mhm.
like, you were tinkering with it for a bit. You got the ratios down, you figured out what you wanted, what you didn't. And I mean, this
Yeah.
definitely looks very, very clean. So great place for
Thanks,
people
man.
to start out
Yeah.
in the format. And
I
speaking of
appreciate it.
ratios, one last question from the chat from Zach Running Cheese.
Okay.
They're asking about the dust shoots. They're saying, do you side out the dust shoots going second, or do you always leave them in? What's your opinion on dust shoot in the format for that?
Depends on the deck, depends on the matchup. Monarchs, you keep them in 100% of the time.
Mm,
Um, Chain Burn, you obviously take them out. If you're going against the mirror, I'd probably take them out first or second,
mm,
just because it's a back row heavy deck, you know? Yeah, it depends on the matchup. I would say if you're the Dust Shoot, one is people play 3 a lot, and I am a firm believer in the 2 ratio. I think 3 is too many.
mm,
Um, but it's something you have to get a feel for. Basically, just like if your opponent is playing a deck that's going to have cards in hand a lot of the time, you keep it in game 1 and 2. You're playing like your average deck, like you were playing Bazoo Return
mm.
in your last video. Bazoo Return, keep it in going first, take it out going second. If you're playing against something like Warriors or Chain Burn, or even just like pure Stein OTK, I would probably take them out completely all the time. So it's just
Yeah,
something you have to get a feel for. It depends on the matchup.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think this will probably vary depending on the player as well. Like when you get
Hmm.
into these sorts of decisions, like the real nitty gritty, it really does take a lot of experience and just like different players have
Yeah.
different play styles. Different players are more okay bricking on dash shoot later in the game as a trade off for like the power it can give them if they get it early enough, right? So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I think that it's great to hear your perspective on it though because clearly that worked out well for you and managed to allow you to win the whole thing. So, congrats again on the win here.
Thank
Uh,
you.
and I hope that everyone out there, maybe watched these games and realized that Stein Format maybe isn't as bad as you maybe gave it credit for. But even if you don't want to play Stein Format, we got another tournament coming up next month. Chimera Tech Format should be happening in about 2 weeks. I'll be having locals for that beforehand as well. So head on over to the YGO from Zero Discord server if you want to join in that. It should be a lot of fun. And maybe you can be in the winner's seat next tournament as well. Although Jim Bob won't make that easy, I'm assuming. So, uh,
I'll try my best.
yeah. But that's gonna do it for the stream for now. I hope that you all enjoyed as always. Do all the YouTube stuff, like, comment, subscribe, etc. But thanks for joining me today, and congrats again to you, Jim Bob, and congrats to
Thank you.
Transtom as well. They didn't join us in the call, but making it to second is no mean feat either. So very, very good performance from them, especially on a very, very unique build. 47 cards is something you don't generally see.
Yes. Yeah.
Uh,
I was shocked by that too. But yeah,
yeah.
have a good night, B Sox, and you have a good night, YouTube.
Yeah. See y'all next time. Peace. Okay.